We live in a world of expectations. They are imposed externally or are created internally by ourselves. Balancing these expectations is crucial to our happiness, well-being, and self-worth. It is important to balance the expectations placed upon us such that we are kind to ourselves and accomplish what is meaningful and worthwhile. Most of all, we must be kind to ourselves. Adjust your expectations so that they are reasonable and possible. Celebrate your successes and learn from what you could not accomplish. Be comfortable with yourself. We light the chalice today with the words of the Reverend David Breeden. We kindle this flame in expectation, not the expectation that justice will soon prevail, not the expectation that the struggle will soon be won, yet in the expectation that companionship and joy will be ours on the journey. We kindle this flame in community and expectation. The first reading today is Let Them Go by Reverend Gretchen Haley. Whatever you have come in anticipating, whatever you expect or worry for our world, for the future of our lives, let it go. Make space in your heart to be surprised. Make room in your soul for a new story to take shape. Let astonishment be possible as this life that remains a miracle. Imagine here the bursting of joy, relentless and resilient, coming in waves, washing over us, and music and story, silence. And still this dreaming together, being hope for each other and courage to believe in this new day dawning for all of us. The second reading is Expect Nothing by Alice Walker. Expect nothing. Live frugally, on surprise. Become a stranger to need of pity. Or, if compassion be freely given out, take only enough. Stop short of urge to plead. Then purge away the need. Wish for nothing larger than your own small heart, or greater than a star. Tame wild disappointment with caress unmoved and cold. Make of it a parka for your soul. Discover the reason why so tiny humans exist at all. So scared, unwise, but expect nothing. Live frugally, on surprise.
So I was just sitting there in amazement. My brothers each had a giant box, bigger than me, bigger than this pulpit, it seemed, not really under, to the side of the Christmas tree. My dad was videotaping with a 1990s camcorder that rested on the shoulder still. Seems like a long time ago. So my brothers started opening these boxes. First a big box, then they opened it next, a smaller box, and then yet a smaller box, and yet another, and another, and another. Finally, after what seemed to me as little brother, looking on, as 1,000 boxes, there was a note in the final box. They both read as quickly as possible. One brother who could read a little quicker started dashing out the door. The other brother, still reading the note, kind of just followed along, still trying to read, knowing that he probably should follow his brother. So we moved. We followed, not knowing myself where we were going, then my mom and my dad with the camera, through the Minnesota snow to the neighbor's back porch. where there were glistening on this Christmas Eve with bows on them, my brother's new bikes. And quietly, if you listen closely to the video and filtered out the ridiculous joy of my older brothers, you could hear a little preacher-to-be saying, "I want a bike too." As much as my parents reminded me that I had just gotten a bike a few months back for my birthday, and I still had more gifts under the tree to open and had way more than my older brothers, still, I expected something different. This didn't seem right to me. And now this thing, this bike that I hadn't even imagined before or thought of, wasn't even a wish or a hope or a desire. All of a sudden, it was something that I didn't have that made me feel like I was missing out, that I wasn't getting what I deserved or ought to have. Now, I'm not going to comment on parenting choices of my folks. I clearly had an opinion at the time. But I came around to not hold too much of a grudge toward them, and it did illustrate an early truth to me, that when we begin to expect too much, and when we begin to expect a certain outcome or a certain thing, and when those expectations are rooted in comparison to others, assumptions of sameness, that we should all receive the exact same things, we have the exact same needs or realities, which is a deeply pushed American narrative in our psyches around capitalism and keeping up with the Joneses, then when it doesn't turn out that way, disappointment, resentment, loss, sadness take over and fill us up. Expect nothing, writes Alice Walker. Live frugally on surprise. Take only what you need. Expectation is our theme this month in worship, in small groups, in classes, and it is a tricky thing. Our expectations are often products of such a matrix of different influences of personalities and families and previous experience and social structures, of economic and social pressures related to our identities, oppressions and privileges based on race and class and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation and gender identity. They become filters through which our expectations are created. Sometimes we might expect too much or expect too little, and how to adapt and change to survive and stay balanced frames how we live and breathe and move in this world. Recently, some of my minister colleagues were discussing a guide that we had saw, a guide to apologies, it was titled. This is what ministers do in their free time, I guess. It was about self-empowerment and agency. It had two columns. One side, when to say sorry, and the other side, when not to. And the first column said, say sorry when you've crossed a boundary, or you've become aware of some hurt you have caused, or you were mistaken about something. That was it. And the other side, when not to apologize. And it listed this whole litany. Don't apologize for taking up space, consuming resources, expressing yourself, asking for something, asserting yourself, putting yourself first, being different, saying yes, saying no, being happy, having needs or feelings, disappointing others, choosing what works for you, among others, and many more. Now, these are good things to consider and reflect on and remember, and like anything, it isn't a perfect list, which these ministers began to attack and analyze quickly. And in particular, the main learning from looking at that and discussion about it, it requires a realization of differences in socialization that is not on the list. One colleague added this, which I think was critical. I love this, and I think of it a little more like this, that if you were socialized because of your identity, your race, gender, class, ability, nationality, to never do these things, if you were socialized to always apologize for taking up space or asserting yourself or having needs or feelings, then by all means, absolutely, don't apologize for these things. Claim your space and your agency. However, if you were taught and socialized to never apologize for anything, for never apologize for asserting yourself or having needs, and doing it at the expense of others without any regard to anyone around you, then maybe you should apologize from time to time for doing something at someone else's expense. This is an important nuance and reminder. For some, claiming their agency and not apologizing for taking up space or impacting others is an act of liberation, and often it's reparation for histories of oppression. for people who were told to not expect anything because they didn't deserve it by society. And for others, the ability to move and be in the world without pause or concern about how they impact other people, how their decisions might make someone else's life better or worse, or without any worry what someone else may think, or without even questioning the ease with which they have access to power or freedom or happiness, then not apologizing is an act of privilege, whether recognized or not. What we expect out of this life, what we expect out of each day or moment, out of our relationships or careers or whatever it is a complex thing made out of what we deeply believe, what we hope for or have strived for, and what we have been told of what we should expect. It's good to have clear expectations in almost every setting, ethics and practices that help guide how we live together in community, in classrooms, conference rooms, family rooms, living rooms, dining rooms, how we are in relationship with each other for the well-being and the safety and the health and the wholeness of everyone. It is good to know what to expect much of the time, to be able to breathe easy, and to know to some extent there is room for you wherever you are. There is space that is safe enough for you to go about life free from the extremes of uncertainty and fear. It becomes a much harder issue when those expectations are based on assumptions or stereotypes, on messaging that places oppressive structures on some and an easy life on others, sometimes unintentionally, often unnoticed, at least by those who don't suffer the effects. I want you to think, when in your own life have the expectations of others been a debilitating burden, or worse, a soul-wounding assault on your identity? When in your own life has your own experience and your own expectations driven you too far past the boundaries of your health, pushed you too strongly against your better inner voice to the point of depletion of the soul? And if you haven't experienced those moments, why do you think that might be the case? I think we know from our own lives and from the stories of others that what we can expect in this life and what we should expect from ourselves and from others is not the same for every person in every context. We are in a varied, diverse, beautiful, and broken world. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can move beyond the pushed and oppressive expectations with intention and with love and with grace, those expectations that define us or box us in based on parts of our identity that are exploited to limit our humanity, which ends up hurting and limiting the humanity of us all. Maybe we can move beyond that, and all our expectations, how to be in community together, how to frame our relationships in our homes or in the public square, maybe they can be rooted in values we hold dear instead of stereotypes and structures of oppression that imprison our shared humanity. Maybe our expectations can be about affirming our differences as beautiful, understanding our gifts as varied, showing up and offering what we can to the building up of a world that is just and loving and filled with grace and hope and possibility, where there's enough acceptance and accountability, safe enough space so that we can let down our guard from time to time, now and again, and be surprised by something beautiful and unexpected. To live frugally on surprise and not take more than we need, writes the poet. To have whatever expectations we had coming in and let them go, to open up to something more loving and more beautiful. A few weeks ago, on pilgrimage with our youth in Concord, Massachusetts, we gathered along a rock wall near the Old North Bridge, where the shot heard round the world was fired, under a tree by the Old Manse, a house which held the lives and writings of many transcendentalists, including Nathaniel Hawthorne and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Sitting there, we reflected together on our identity as Unitarian Universalists, both in this cradle and history of sacred places for Unitarianism and a little bit of Universalism there, as well as thinking of our roots here in Rochester. We discussed how we hope to be together, both in youth group, among each other, and a larger lesson for life. People shared what church meant to them, the importance of accepting communities, a place where they felt like they belonged, and 3 core principles arose to guide their being together, which Derek will now enforce very strongly going forward. Be here, as in show up. Be yourself and be open. That's it. Be here, be yourself, and be open. A simple yet grounding reminder. And sometimes I wonder, maybe that's all we really need at the core in this world, at least at the core. Be here and be yourself and be open, because they interact with each other. And you know you're doing it right if none of those realities are stagnant. If being open impacts how you define yourself, and how you define yourself impacts where you show up, and where you show up impacts how open you are to those around you and the world, and round again, over and over again. Because we know all too well, all the time, that in the words of William Stafford, it could happen any time. Tornado, earthquake, Armageddon, it could happen. Or sunshine, love, salvation. It could, you know, he writes. That's why we wake and look out. There are no guarantees in this life, but there are some bonuses, like morning, like right now, like noon, and like evening. No guarantees, but some bonuses. So one last story. This past week, I had an unexpected bonus. It's not every day that online I read and appreciate and agree with much of the writing of a Southern Baptist preacher from Kentucky. This week I did. Maybe you heard about this in the news. The Reverend Jonathan Carl is minister of a small Baptist congregation in Kentucky. He has become what he called himself an accidental casualty of a tweet from the President of the United States. The president had tweeted and misspelled the name by one letter, Jonathan Carl with a C instead of a K. Jonathan Carl with a K is an ABC news reporter. And the president had called this news reporter a lightweight reporter regarding accusations around the hurricane and its damaging effects to Alabama, etc. So instead, he called the Reverend Jonathan Carl, Baptist preacher in Kentucky of a church no larger than ours. And the preacher used this opportunity at first to laugh, but then after receiving vitriol and misinformed verbal attacks from supporters of the tweet, to write an open public letter to the president. This is some of what he wrote in admonitions to the current occupant of the Oval Office. He wrote, "Although I was an accidental casualty, caught in the crossfire of your lightweight tweet, your attack was very purposeful and hurtful. Many others, whether American citizens or global citizens, feel wounded and hurt by the shrapnel and side effects of your ongoing Twitter attacks." He continued, suggesting this: exercise self-control. Be more patient and selective with your correspondence. Please don't make the Twitter universe such a dark and depressing place. It should not be a place to argue and fight or jockey for position. We can disagree and debate without childish name-calling. You can make Twitter a better place. And then he said, I drive past a memorial for Abraham Lincoln every day, and this is one thing that president said: I'm rather inclined to silence. And whether that be wise or not, it is at least more unusual nowadays to find one who can hold his tongue than to one who cannot. Finally, he counseled the president, be slow to tweet, apologize more, be humble, choose kindness. Goodness speaks louder than harsh words. Gentleness builds up instead of tearing down. The world is hateful enough. The world needs more light and hope. Preach. It's not what I expected when reading from a Southern Baptist preacher from Kentucky, but maybe it's what I should expect. A bonus in this week and this world, that although it's quite likely that this preacher and I would disagree on many things, in particular theology and politics, in this instance of theology and politics, it was a pleasant surprise, an unexpected use of a mistake. Sometimes you just don't know what's coming in this world. You can't anticipate or expect what might show up, come hurling in from who knows where, and fall right into your hands, right into your heart, and then it is up to you to ask, how will I respond to this experience of the world? How will I use my gifts to offer whatever love and hope I can to others? How will I be surprised and expect things and take nothing for granted in this life other than the expectation that there can still be more love and beauty and joy mixed and mingled with my own sorrow and grief and despair? Sometimes you have to take a breath and a moment and think a bit. Have I been expecting too much of others or myself? Have I been expecting too little of others or myself? And how might I find a way to expect nothing other than that love and justice can exist and to use my life accordingly? Maybe it's like this poem from Raymond Carver. And did you get what you wanted from this life even so? I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved and to feel myself beloved on the earth. I hadn't expected to get a bike, nor had my brothers. My parents may have expected their excitement, but maybe not my disappointment. They surely did not expect me to share this story with you. But stories are like that. They aren't clean-cut and easy, and life is like that. It isn't clean-cut and easy. Sometimes the best moments and gifts are unexpected, and the best we can do is to be here, be ourselves, and be open. Pay attention and care for each other, for some new story to take shape at this life that remains a miracle, even when we least expect it. I invite you, as you're comfortable, to join a hand next to you or place your hand over your heart and breathe deep the breath of life. Love will guide us home. Just be here, be yourself, and be open. Amen.